Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Allen Institute. My name is Claire Weichselbaum, and I am a member of our education and engagement team here. And we are delighted that you all could join us for Voices of Open Science, a science storytelling show in collaboration with the Story Collider podcast. The Allen Institute is a research nonprofit that was founded 21 years ago by Paul G. Allen with the goal of tackling some of the most complex problems in biology through big, team, and open science. And this event is part of our celebration of Open Science Week, when the Allen Institute highlights the impact of our open science practices, sharing our data, analytical tools, lab protocols, and other scientific resources freely and publicly to accelerate discovery. And tonight, 5 Allen Institute scientists will be openly sharing stories of their science journeys, revealing the human side of science that often gets hidden behind lab coats and test tubes and big words. These 5 individuals span a variety of career stages and scientific backgrounds, and they've each taken very different paths to the Allen Institute. But as you will hear, they all share a steadfast love of science, which might even start to rub off on you by the end of the evening. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to our hosts tonight, Kent Whipple and Paula Croxon of the Story Collider.
Please give it up for Claire.
Hello, everybody. We are the Story Collider.
Welcome. We know you could be many places on a beautiful Thursday night, and you're here with us, and you're here to hear some incredible stories. So we want you to give yourselves some applause for being here tonight.
In fact, we want to check in a little bit. So we can't see you super well. We also have live streamers here who need to hear you. So by round of applause, if you are at your first ever Story Collider show, let us know now.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, and if you haven't been, or if you have been to a Story Collider show, let's hear it.
Oh, I have.
Oh, there are more of those. They could beat us in a war.
There are more of you than of us. So, Ken, for those people, all of the people in the room who haven't been to a Story Collider show before, what is Story Collider?
Story Collider is an organization that helps create stories that involve science but come from a human perspective.
That's right. That's right. What you won't see tonight are any PowerPoint presentations or keynote, if that's your jam. You won't see any graphs. You won't see any data. You won't see any lectures. You will not learn
No
anything.
learning. Let's vow not to learn tonight.
I heard a whoop for not learning. Excellent.
If you start learning, go grab a drink.
Slouch down in your seat, relax a little bit. You're not here to learn or retain any information tonight. You are just here to listen. On that note, if you have a cell phone on you, it would be a great time to silence it now, please. If you're working on a slide deck for your next presentation, if you need to text, anything like that, if you need to take a quick break, please do that when Ken and I are talking, because we don't matter. But, I mean, Kent matters, but I don't matter.
No, you matter. We all matter.
But our 5 storytellers, they're doing this for the very first time. They're doing a very hard thing. So I ask all of you tonight to be there with them when each of them tells their 10-minute story. Give them your full attention. Give them all of the love that you can give them. How many people here are here to see someone they know tell a story?
Okay. So can I ask a favor of all of you? Can we all pretend that we know every single one of these storytellers and that we love them? Can we make that agreement?
More.
Yeah. More. So when I say our next storyteller is Blubbity, it's Paula. What would you do? Ah,
Oh, that's good. That's very
that's the
good.
way to do it.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, we'll practice that a couple more times before we bring up our first storyteller. Let's get to the theme of tonight. So the theme, as Claire said, is Voices of Open Science. Ken, what does open science mean to you?
I'm in a room of some of the smartest people in Seattle, and I'm not a scientist. I'm a storytelling teacher, and science to me is magic.
I mean, it kind of is magic. I learned about some stuff today that happens in this institute that kind of is
It's magic.
Like the thing with the inflating the brain to like 5 times its size. These people are nodding at me like this is a normal thing. Yeah, it's magic. It's definitely magic.
So what does it mean to you?
Open science. Well, I am a scientist by training, and when I was a grad student, open science to me meant that when I was testing my rats in the maze that I had built for them, I would let them roam freely on the shelf, and nibble on my lab book and steal my pencil. So I just thought it was really cute that they would do that. And one day, one day, I frequently came in very hungover to the lab. One particular day that I came in very hungover to the lab, I had to have a little sleep. And so I kind of sat down on the floor. It was kind of one of those emergency sleeps. Ever had one of those? They're like a compulsory nap that needed to happen right now. So I kind of sat down in the corner of the room. And when I came around, all 6 little faces of my rats were looking down at me, wondering whether they can make a run for it. And right at that moment, my supervisor knocked on the door to check on me. And that was almost open science because my science was almost way down the corridor. So, yeah, I've learned a few things since then. I was a very diligent scientist after that. So, yeah, I guess that's what open science meant to me. But what it means to me now is that science is everywhere and everyone can be a scientist. And I really mean that. And so tonight we're going to hear from scientists who are themselves human beings. And that's a really wonderful thing to celebrate.
What?
So, yay, I know.
Scientists are human beings.
We are people too.
I also would like to acknowledge the folks who are watching us on the live stream. We also thank you for being here.
Hi, live streamers.
Let's applaud our live stream friends.
And of course, you've noticed we have some ASL interpretation.
Now, also, I want to bring up that some of these stories, the great thing about storytelling is you're going to get 10 minutes to live another life, a life that isn't your own, and to see the world through someone else's eyes. And they can be funny, they can be sad, they can run the whole range of emotion. And so we'd like to point out that some of the stories tonight might be a little heavy, that involve some substance abuse and suicide discussion. So please take care of yourself. If a story starts becoming uncomfortable for you, please take care of yourself. But also, please give love to the storytellers.
Also, please take care of yourself in general, like in life. That would also be
That'd be great.
But yeah, these stories, some of them are heavy. There's a lot of funny moments as well. We think you're really going to enjoy them. We're so excited to bring this show to you tonight.
Yeah.
Let's give it a little more.
We have 5 Allen Institute volunteers. They actually volunteered to spend their time
Some of them are regretting it deeply now.
to come up here and share a moment of their life with people they may not know. And so they've spent months, almost 2 months, working on these stories, drafting them, crafting them, working with us. We've been coaching them. So before we get into everyone, let's give all 5 of them one more round of applause. We couldn't be prouder of y'all. So,
Are you guys ready to hear your first story?
yes. All right.
Okay, that was okay, but it wasn't great. Remember what we said at the beginning? Are you guys ready to hear your first story?
Yes. All right. Our first storyteller is Max DeParte. Parte. You told me it, and I messed it up again. Max is a research associate in gene therapy But the neat thing about him is he also loves, well, not that that isn't neat, but he also loves fly fishing, skiing, and his dogs. All right, please give it up for Max.
The only sound in the microscopy suite is the whirring of the computer fans and the clicking of the shutters on and off. And it's totally dark except for the cone of light that's projected by the computer monitor. It makes me think how looking at cells in a microscope really reminds me of looking at meteors through a telescope with my dad when I was 12. The two of us sitting on the hood of his car as the Perseids streak across the sky, and I learn about, how he puts red film over the dome light so it protects our night vision, and how astronomers name meteor showers out of the constellation it appears that they're coming from. And I've always been curious about the world around me. Ever since that age, I think I knew that I wanted to be a scientist. So as the fans whir and the shutters click, I take out my phone to check my email, and I see a message that I have been waiting months and maybe years to receive. See, for the last 4 months or so, I've been waiting for a reply from my grad school applications. And at this point in the spring, it is getting really late, and I'm starting to lose some hope. And I'm starting to doubt this newly formed identity as a young scientist I have, and am also starting to question, why was it that I wanted to go to grad school anyway? Why did I want to get a PhD? I always assumed that after college I would go on to that next step, but anyway, so when I see the word accepted, I'm just able to let out all of the months of stress and anxiety and doubt, and as I jump out of my chair, just start crying and laughing and smiling at the same time. And as I'm dancing, I can taste the tears and I have a smile ear to ear. And I probably looked like one of those, what emotion are you feeling today posters, but if you just squished them all into one person at the same time. Despite how excited I was about this and how long I had been waiting, I decided not to tell anybody for days. See, for now, it was still all mine. The doubt and the hesitation, the excitement, the possibility, and the choice, the option, it was still mine. But I felt like as soon as I told anybody, the option was gone. See, it didn't seem like it was my choice whether or not to go. I had studied, I had trained, I had applied, and now I got in. And so, who was I, whether or not I'm doubting if I want it or not? Who am I to say that I'm not going to? So, I accept. When I show up at the University of North Carolina, I'm hit by this wall of heat and humidity that, as somebody who grew up in the Pacific Northwest, I did not know that existed on planet Earth. Thank God labs are climate-controlled environments, otherwise I don't think I would have stayed in that state. And during my first year, I learned so much incredible science. I learn about how researchers are trying to use aspects of our immune system to create the first vaccines for HIV. I learned how hepatitis A virus, it circulates in our bloodstream in these lipid envelopes in order to hide itself from detection by our immune system. And, I'm just fascinated by everything around me and love what I'm learning. And, I should feel totally at home. But I've never felt more out of place in my life. I just can't stop comparing myself to, these incredible people that I get to call my friends and my colleagues. People that, it seems like they showed up here and they were just in overdrive already. And for the first time in my life, I can't seem to get out of second gear. So my lab bench is right in the center of the lab where everybody who walks by can see me and say hi. Normally that's, totally all right. But today's not one of those days that's all right. I'm loading up another plate to run a PCR experiment, and I really should be paying attention, but my mind is completely preoccupied. My head's just racing with all these thoughts about my anxiety about my project, doubt about my potential and what I was doing there. And as I feel that kind of cold sweat coming and just hear the normal thoughts racing around, what are you doing here, Max? You don't belong here, all right? Like, you're not good enough. You can't come up with a research project, and you're not gonna be able to design experiments or anything. You have to just figure out how to get through this without letting anybody know how worthless you are, okay? And as I start to notice the slight tremble in my hand and lightheadedness, I realize that in this effort to stop myself from crying at the lab bench, I'm not breathing anymore. I realize that I'm holding my breath and tightening my chest. I'm flexing my core and drawing my arms in like I just want to fold and crumple and hide inside of myself and just disappear. Now, I don't have to have a PhD to know that I cannot sustain this anaerobic lifestyle, but it's fine. Everything's fine. I've done this before. So I gently set down my equipment, stand up, and take a few steps around the corner into the unused tissue culture room or into the cold room. Make sure that I'm alone, and I just let myself implode and cry until these thoughts stop racing and the panic attack passes. Well, I think I'm 1 year down, only 4.5 to go. At this point, one of the only things really keeping me going was that later on that summer, a total solar eclipse was set to pass over the United States, and I was about to leave in a few days to go meet my brother and some college friends and backpack through the Grand Tetons. Now, my apartment isn't very big, but I couldn't think of anything better to do with the space than to just lay out every single piece of camping gear that I own. And so for days, when I'm going into the kitchen, I'm stepping over my folded tent and into the bathroom, walking past the mess kit. Every time I see it, I just get more and more excited about this trip and, realize I haven't been this excited about anything in a long time. I don't know if I've been excited about anything in a long time. Arriving at our campsite, directly underneath the massive peaks of Grand Teton, I just breathe in that familiar tranquility of the high alpine tundra with the dry air, open sky. We spend our time recalling stories from past trips we've had and laughing way too hard at really dumb inside jokes that we had in college. And, it kind of just feels like a dream. Like it's pleasant and enjoyable, but also kind of confusing, and I'm not really sure what's going on. You see, these last few days have kind of planted this idea in my head, this crazy idea. That I knew I was very unhappy. That I understood. But what was so revolutionary was this idea that I didn't have to be unhappy. On the morning of the eclipse, we got up, packed our things, and set out to a overlook where we were going to watch the day's events. As we're sitting there waiting for the moment of totality and snacking on trail mix, savoring that salty coating on the M&Ms that the peanuts leave, I don't really have any expectations for what to come, but you can just kind of feel this sort of energy welling up around us as it slowly starts to get a little darker and cooler. It's like there's a silent symphony somewhere tuning up. You can't hear anything, but it's like you can feel the reverberations off of their strings. And then the sky goes dark and everything gets quiet. And my mind goes quiet. For the first time in I don't know how long, I can't hear that voice that's telling me that you are incompetent. And I can't hear that voice that's telling me you don't have any other options. It's like the universe is, trying to tell me like this world is big and weird and crazy and awesome. And why would you think you know the one way that your life is supposed to go? I do have the power to make my own choices and to choose happiness. So back in North Carolina, looking at the pine tree out my window, I finally let myself put words to, these thoughts that have been forming over that last trip. That, quite simply put, there's nothing in the world that I want to do less and that fills me with more dread and displeasure than the idea of getting up, going into lab, putting on a smile, and just continuing down that path that I now am not really sure why I ever wanted. So as I lie there, I told myself, I said, all right, well, this is my chance. This is when I get to make my choice. So I opened up my laptop and quickly closed the browser that had 25 tabs open because I didn't want to think about that. I drafted an email to my advisor and to the department head, informed them of my decision, and I hit send. Despite being totally confident, totally sure that this was the right decision, that I was making the right choice, I did not think that I would ever get over the weight of guilt and shame of that failure, of my failure. So in the days after, what really started to feel kind of like a, sick joke or conspiracy or something is how many people kept coming up and telling me, oh, well done, like, good job, that's great. I'm thinking, no, like, somebody tell me I'm a failure. I need some validation here, okay? Like, tell me I made it here. I'm supposed to stick it out and make it out the other end, right? Nose to the grindstone, like, for better or for worse. But I can tell that they all really mean it. And after all, I'm not the first person to have ever experienced self-doubt or, to question a path that they set out on. I'm definitely not the first person to ever leave PhD or, decide later that they don't actually want to run a lab for their whole life. I learned what they're all, really saying to me. And they're saying, well done for standing up and speaking out for yourself. And, that's great that you figured that out. And, good job choosing what makes you happy. That was 7 years ago this month that I looked out that North Carolina window at the pine trees. And depending on the day, depending on my mood, I still remember, at least, maybe I can feel a little bit of that shame that for so many years weighed me down and covered me. But for the most part, when I think about the whole experience, I'm just so proud about probably the best decision that I ever made in my life. And, ultimately, I learned that I learned to listen to myself and to what my body's trying to say. And I learned that all of us as scientists are so much more than our successes and our failures. Because failure is not a measure of your ability. It's just proof that you're trying. Thank you.
Keep it going for Max,
Max!
everybody.
Thank you, Max. Wow. So now you see how the night's going to go. Well, it's interesting. I was sitting there thinking, about 20 years ago, I met Mr. Allen. I, in another life, was an art dealer in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he would come into our gallery and purchase art and chat. He was really a lovely guy. And he would ask for restaurant references for me because, as you can tell, I might like food. And one day I get a call, and they said, Mr. Allen's on the phone. I'm like, who? Mr. Allen. I'm like, which Allen? Paul Allen is on the phone, Ken. I'm like, oh, shit. I'm like, hello, Mr. Allen, how are you? And he goes, well, I'm wondering about a good New Mexican restaurant that you'd recommend. And I said, well, I think you could go here or go here. And he goes, well, is there a place that I might not be recognized? And I'm like, you're Paul Allen. You're going to be recognized. So I sent him to a small little diner that I thought maybe would be a good place for him. And it wasn't long after that I decided I needed a career change. And I followed Max's path, kind of, or his bravery, and decided to move out of New Mexico, move up here, and start a new life.
That's awesome. Nice work.
Thank you.
Paul Allen, working magic all over the place.
That's
huh?
right.
I know.
Excellent taste in art, if you don't know.
Are you guys ready for your next story? Whoa. All right, our next storyteller is a research associate in the tissue processing department, loves crafting, singing, and her cat, Maleficent. Please welcome to the stage, Rachel McHugh.
Yes.
Hello. I was a very precocious child, which is a nice way of saying a know-it-all. These are the things that I wanted to be when I grew up: an anthropologist, an astrophysicist, a musician, a rock star, a mathematician, a teacher, an Egyptologist, a sociologist, and a psychologist. Notice how biologists didn't make the list. That's because I thought that biologists dealt with bugs and bodily fluids, and that was disgusting, and I was going to have no part of it. So when I was in high school and middle school, I remember dissecting things. And in middle school, I remember dissecting the perfect earthworm. And then in high school, refusing to dissect the fetal pig because. But I knew that biology wasn't going to be my forte, so I just kind of went with everything else that I loved. And I ended up graduating high school almost with my associate's degree through the Running Start program. Although the last quarter of college, I didn't go to class very much, so I kind of failed the last quarter. Didn't get the degree. But nonetheless, I had finished high school, and I was going to go off to my next endeavor, which was college, and I was so excited. I was going to be the best student with the best grades. And of course, my first week, I made friends with some of the worst people. I ended up getting invited to my first college party after my first week. And that was the first time I tried alcohol. That was the first time I tried drugs. And I loved it. It was awesome. And I kind of thought maybe this would be a problem, but I was completely beside myself. I was invincible. And so I remember playing rock band with my friends, getting drunk and singing, and fantasizing about becoming the rock star that I really wanted to be when I was a kid. And then, of course, with consequences, I got caught on a dry campus, underage, drinking, and of course, in my infinite wisdom, gave them a fake name because I had no ID on me to corroborate with. So that has been fixed since then. But nonetheless, with my failing grades and my continued affinity for partying, college just wasn't really the best place for me, so I dropped out. I decided to go back to a community college instead, back in my hometown, and finish my associate's degree. I had to take 2 science classes, and so I took Intro to Chemistry and Intro to Biology. And I walked into my biology class hesitantly, and my biology professor was a ponytailed, hippie marine biologist, and he was the most fun professor I've ever had in my life. he took us on a field trip to the tide pools. And of course, he had a dare for anybody who would offer or to take him up on the dare. And so it was whoever will lick a sea anemone gets $1. So of course I had to do it. So I went, I did the thing you got to know about sea anemones are the nematocysts. They stick to your fingers when you touch them, but they don't puncture your fingers because your finger skin is too thick. However, your tongue skin is not. You know that feeling you get when you eat too much pineapple? It was kind of like that, plus my tongue went numb. Temporarily, but nonetheless. So I graciously accepted my $1, and I used it to bum a cigarette from some locals who were camping. Classic. So I finished my associate's degree, and I decided that I was going to go back to school to a university and try again. And so this time I went across state lines to Oregon, and the first thing I noticed was that ecology was so hard, and it broke me. The numbers, they were so complicated, and the math was hard, and I couldn't focus. And so I ended up going, my thoughts were getting really dark. So I ended up going to the counseling services, which then they diagnosed me with ADHD and anxiety and depression. And so they gave me all the meds to go along with all of that. Another note is that back then, anxiety meds weren't regulated the way that they are now. And so they gave me a lot of anxiety medication. And I wasn't complaining, but in my vulnerable state, I did start to abuse them. And so I remember there was a night when I took a little bit too many of my anxiety medication and scared my friends, and they brought me to the hospital. And then they called my mom and told her that it was a suicide attempt, and my mom lives here in Washington, so it wasn't a suicide attempt. But nonetheless, she came down, and she packed up all my stuff and moved me out of Oregon, and we went back to Washington. Now, my parents tried really hard to do with what the tools that they had. But having an adult daughter who was basically struggling with a mental breakdown mixed with substance use disorder, it's a lot to handle. And unfortunately, I ended up homeless, living out of my car. And so I ended up working many jobs, but this next job was the Boys and Girls Club. And my boss at the Boys and Girls Club figured out that I was living out of my car, and he said, "That's crazy. Why are you living? I have a perfectly good spare room, and my wife wouldn't mind, and you can stay for however long you need to get back on your feet." And so I said, great. And so I lived there for about a couple months and saved up, got my own apartment, moved out, and then I lost my job. And that was a common occurrence. I've lost a lot of jobs in my life. And most of the time, I'm really unsure as to why. But probably more on that later. So while on unemployment, I went back to school again, and this time through a program through unemployment where I got to earn my phlebotomy certification. And so I had finally gotten a certification and gotten a job at a clinic working, of course, with bodily fluids. But it was as close to a biologist as I could come. And so I went, and then I decided that I would go back to school again to finally finish my bachelor's degree. I went to University of Washington, Bothell, which it was a great small campus, which was great for me, less of the partying. And I was able to finish my bachelor's degree with I majored in biology with a minor in chemistry. And so I decided that I was on a roll. I finally finished it. And so I was going to go to grad school. So I did my GRE, and then I applied to 8 schools, and I conditionally got into one. Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis. And so I moved across the country to go to school, to go to grad school. And the first thing that I noticed was that my PI and I butt heads a lot. And she and I didn't agree on a healthy work-life balance. But yeah, I had made some friends, and that was helpful, but things were getting hard. My classes were really hard. Teaching was really hard. Reading papers was really hard. Like everything in my life had become really hard, and I didn't know what to do or how to fix it. And I'm 2,000 miles away from my family and all my friends back here. And so I called my brother and told him that I was going to check myself in at a hospital because I didn't feel safe with myself. And it was interesting being in a hospital without your family visiting. But it was, it was enlightening. They said that, well, the thing that you need to do is you need to change your stress levels. And I said, are you kidding me? I'm a grad student. Like we don't know stress. Like we are invincible. We just keep going. We're like the Energizer Bunny. But, do you know that 21.2% of grad students meet the criteria for suicide risk? And 15% of grad students of that in this 2018 study seriously had considered attempting suicide. That is heartbreaking, and I was part of the statistics. And, I think that something needs to change with that. But for me, in my life, all I could do was change my degree path. So instead of getting a PhD, I decided to get a master's degree instead to shorten my stay in Indiana. And so I completed it, and I graduated and moved my stuff back across the country and got a job here at the Allen Institute. And I thought that now life was going to be perfect. Now I'd gotten my job, I did my degree, everything had fallen to line, and now everything was going to be great. But it wasn't. And it was getting harder every day. And so talking with my therapist, we had decided that she thought it was a good idea that I should go get tested. And so I went to the testing place. I took the tests. I answered the questions. I played the games. I did all of the things, and they came back with a earth-shattering diagnosis that I am autistic. And I guess it wasn't that earth-shattering to me because I kind of always knew that something was different. But it made me think about my sensory processing disorder, and it made me think about all of the awkward communication I have with coworkers and friends and meltdowns. But it made a lot of sense, and it really shifted my whole worldview of things. And of course, a Swedish study found that 2 times the number of neurodivergent people end up with substance use disorder. And so I finally am here. I'm a little angry because I should have been diagnosed at 6, not 36. And, you know, because girls don't get autism. And, you know, I talk too much to have autism. But, you know, we're not our stereotypes. But, you know, I have my view of who I am now, and I'm happy with it. I'm proud to be autistic with ADHD. I'm proud to know who I am. I'm proud that I'm a biologist, and I'm proud that I'm alive.
Thank you.
We're super proud of you, Rachel.
Very good.
Unlike you, I always knew I was going to be a biologist. And I was in the tide pools long before I made it to college. But I also had a formative experience on a field trip. When I was in my undergrad, we went on a field trip, not to tide pools, but to a salt marsh. There's like this very, very strange practice that ecologists use to make measurements, where they take like a square thing and they like throw it down on the ground and then they count what's in it. I forget what that kind of survey is called, and then they do it again and again and again, and then you come back later and you in different conditions. So, for example, salt marshes, sometimes they're dry and sometimes they get flooded, and you can count the different things. So we were out there throwing this quadrat. That's the name of this square thing, and like counting things, and I was hooked. I loved throwing things down and counting things. And it really did set the stage for my career for many years. Later it was neurons that I counted, but like always with the counting for me. Plus, the postdoc who was leading the little expedition that we were on was very hot. So that was helpful also. I had a real crush going on, and my moment to shine finally came on the last day. We had to go back to the same area of the salt marsh, throw the quadrat again, and do the counting, and it was flooded, like very flooded. And so we were like, "Oh, we can't throw the quadrat." And the beautiful, beautiful postdoc said, "Well, I do have a dry suit, so if someone's a strong swimmer, then you could go throw the quadrat and like count." And I was like, I'm a strong swimmer. I can do this. I really don't know what I thought was going to happen. So I get all ready. I get the dry suit. I start to put it on, and I immediately put my finger through the seal on the wrist of the dry suit.
No.
I don't know how much these things cost, but it was definitely more money than I had. Everybody looked disappointed. I wasn't going in the water that day. I just ruined the dry suit of this person that I had a tremendous crush on. The quadrat could not be thrown. The study could not be finished. And all of my dreams of becoming an ecologist were crushed. But I did become a neuroscientist, so I did get to keep counting.
But Do you know many hot neuroscientists?
I know a lot of hot neuroscientists, some of whom are in this very room. So yes, I'm crushing on you all. You guys ready to hear your next story?
All right. Our next storyteller is Rachel Hosell. Rachel is a scientist here, but she teaches others how to use the Institute's data and tools. And she also yells out in excitement whenever she sees a mountain. Please put your hands together for Rachel.
Every wet lab scientist probably knows this feeling. You come home from work after a super long day in lab and you're ready to lay down and go to sleep and, have nice dreams. But the instant you shut your eyes, a thought pops in your head. Did I shut the -80 freezer all the way? For the non-scientists in the audience, -80 freezers are set at -80 degrees Celsius. They're extremely powerful. They hold decades of research in them. And when they fail, it's like a huge disaster in the lab and it's an emergency. So sometimes you have thoughts in your head about, did I shut it all the way? And for some scientists, the next thought is, well, of course I did. It has an alarm. The alarm would have gone off if I didn't shut it all the way, and it's fine. I'll go to lab tomorrow. But for some people, like me, sometimes these thoughts start to spiral and get more and more irrational. They go, well, what if the alarm's actually broken and, the alarm's going off, but you can't hear it, and, you just ruined 10 years of research and the whole department hates you, and you should probably just get in your car and drive to lab right now. It doesn't matter that it's midnight, you need to go to lab. And then these thoughts, sometimes they just keep going on and on and on and on. And the thing is, this was not my first time working with this freezer. I was in my 5th year of my PhD. I had worked with this freezer many times in the last 5 years. I knew how to shut it correctly. This was not a new thing for me. But I started getting, these thoughts. And these thoughts started happening in 2020, right after the pandemic started. And I know for a lot of people, the pandemic sort of just changed everything. Our worlds went upside down. And my world definitely went upside down. We were kicked out of our research labs for a little bit of time, so I spent a lot of time, watching Netflix, watching Love is Blind, watching that tiger show. My roommate was also a fellow PhD student, so we got to bond, over that together. My cat, he got to sit on numerous virtual lab meetings and committee meetings, and he saw some defenses, so he should probably get a doctorate at this point. And in general, things weren't great because it was a global pandemic and I couldn't do my research because I wasn't in lab, but they weren't terrible. I was in a rural state with pretty low infection rates and I could still go outside and go hiking and, I could see my friends and family on Zoom. So, again, things weren't terrible. They weren't great, but they weren't terrible. It really wasn't until year 2 of the pandemic, in 2021, when things actually got worse for me. We were starting to reintegrate into society. Me and my friends all scheduled our vaccine appointments together because we were so excited to finally get vaccinated. And we had a celebratory dinner afterwards. We went out for the first time in a year and a half. And instead of enjoying the dinner, I just had all these constant thoughts about, well, how do you know how clean your fork is? What if you get food poisoning? Is there asbestos? What about a gas leak? All these thoughts that just kept flooding my head. And I tried to ignore them and act normal and just eat my dinner and not talk about, the asbestos I was thinking about. And these thoughts started happening more and more. They also happened a lot in my research lab. And for those who have not worked in a neuroscience research lab, sometimes there are hazardous things in there. There are, lab safety protocols that you do. I was familiar with all these lab safety protocols because I had been in this lab for 5 years at this point. But being in there now was different. It was like there was an improv group in my head, and the theme was 1,000 Ways to Die. And being in the lab, the options were laser beams, razor blades, carcinogens, acid, centrifuges. A lot of scientists have a healthy fear of centrifuges because they can get pretty dangerous. And all these thoughts were just going constantly. And, at first I thought, well, this is just normal grad student stuff. We're all scared sometimes in the lab because we do work with some sometimes scary things. This is normal. But then it started to affect me, physically. I was in the middle of doing this experiment in lab, and my Fitbit started buzzing because it was congratulating me for doing 100 minutes of exercise because of how fast my heart rate was going. I was not exercising. I had been sitting down for the last 2 hours doing a procedure, which required, a lot of stress and focus. But I was so nervous that my heart rate was skyrocketing the entire time that I was sitting there. At this point, I started to think, maybe this isn't, regular anxiety. Maybe I need to talk to someone. And I remember, calling my parents after I left lab, and I explained to them what was happening. And, my dad asked in a serious tone, he said, "Do you think you can continue this PhD? Like physically, are you okay? Is this worth it?" And I said, "I don't know." It's a good question. I was 5 years in, sunken cost fallacy. Really didn't want to turn back at this point. So I went and signed up, for a waiting list to see a therapist. And while I was on that waiting list, I did what anyone would do. I went to Reddit to see what was going on. And I actually found very useful information on Reddit. I learned that, I wasn't going crazy. My situation was not unique at all. And that I was having very textbook symptoms of something called OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. And I thought, that's weird, because OCD is about, people who like cleaning and organizing stuff, right? That's what I thought based on the media and jokes that people make, right? I'm so OCD, look at my nice bookshelf. That was my understanding, and I'm a very type B person who has never color coordinated anything in my entire life. So I was like, I don't know about this. But then I met with a specialist. He diagnosed me right away and said, "You have a pretty severe case." And then, at that moment, I learned that there's a huge difference between, organizing things because you like being organized and it makes you happy, and, organizing things because you're so fearful that if you don't do this thing this right way, all these thoughts in your head tell you, harmful things are going to happen to you and your family, right? That's the distinction here. And I just want to point that out because it takes people many, many years to be diagnosed with OCD correctly because of this misinformation and misrepresentation. It only took me a year to get diagnosed, but that's because I was working with people in my grad program who also had OCD, and they said, "Oh no, yeah, I worry I'm gonna make airplanes crash with my mind, so, that's OCD." And I was like, oh, they don't talk about that in the media, that's not in the jokes. Magical thinking OCD, that's what that subset is called. There's also postpartum OCD, there's a bunch of different subsections. And also, OCD has a pretty high suicide rate, so that's another reason why I just want to bring up accurate representation of what the disorder actually is. So at this point, I had been diagnosed, and I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then my symptoms, they didn't magically go away. I was still having some issues, especially at medical appointments, because so many things can go wrong, right? And I, being a scientist and reading research articles, I knew about lots of things that could go wrong. But I chipped a filling on my tooth, and I had to go to the dentist. And I had not been to the dentist for a few years because I was above age 26, so I'd aged off my parents' dental insurance, and also because I'd gained this fear of the dentist. And so I showed up at the dentist, I tried to explain, I said, "I'm a little nervous." And he probably thought, "Oh yeah, most of my patients don't like pain, they're nervous." I started talking to him about autoclaves because my OCD thoughts convinced me that I was going to get a lethal infection from this dentist office, and I wanted to know their sterilization process. He listened to me ask all these ridiculous questions for a good 10, 20 minutes. Eventually I settled down, and we were able to start the procedure where I was getting a crown put on. And at the very end of the procedure, right when he was finishing up, he was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna, redo this little corner in the back over here, because I'm a little OCD." And I thought, oh, I didn't say anything because he was so patient with me, a very neurotic patient. And, I rolled my eyes internally, but I was just like, oh, wow. If only he knew. If only he knew. And then the next step, was treatment. So I learned that there's a very specific type of treatment for OCD. It's called exposure and response prevention therapy, or ERP for short. Okay, someone's got it. We're good. Basically, I think most people have a vague idea of it. You're scared of snakes, you go see a bunch of snakes. It's that type of thing. But when you're scared of everything, your therapist gets to be really, really creative with how they get to expose you to stuff. 1 week I mentioned I was really scared of various, harsh chemicals, and the next week my therapist showed up with a bottle of Drano in his backpack. I was terrified of Drano at this point. I would avoid walking down the aisles that had Drano in the grocery store because I was so convinced just being in the vicinity of Drano meant I would somehow swallow it or I would somehow burn my eyes out. You know, because when you have OCD, these thoughts are very real, and you believe them. You're like, oh yeah, I can't even go within 20 feet of the Drano. It will kill me. Got it. So he brought out this bottle of Drano, and you know how some people get like, you know, a sack of flour to pretend they have a baby? I basically had a Drano baby at this point. I was instructed to, you know, grab the Drano bottle, you know, hold it, hug it, cradle it, walk around the building with it. And it was good that, you know, these sessions were happening in the evenings when all the undergrad psychology students weren't in the building anymore, because they would probably be like, what on earth is happening with these weird grad students in the Drano? So that was just one example. You know, I had to do many other interesting things for therapy. I had to write my own obituary and read it to people, you know, all sorts of really fun exposure stuff like that. And I ended up doing these sessions for a year. I did over 40 sessions, and normally these sessions would cost hundreds of dollars per session. But since I was at a university, I was actually getting treatment from the clinical psychology PhD candidates, and they needed people for their clinical hours. So I got a very, very discounted rate, and I also got to help some other fellow PhD students, you know, finish their dissertations. And I point that out because, you know, this would have been thousands of dollars, you know, if I didn't have this fortunate opportunity. And so after a year of this therapy, I was really starting to be more normal. You know, friends could notice, my partner could notice, you know, my parents could notice, like, oh, you seem like a normal person again, that's nice. You know, I still had a few barriers left, and one of those barriers was airplanes. I wasn't scared of airplanes, you know, crashing. I was scared of, you know, having a seizure on the airplane. What if I go into anaphylactic shock? What if I have a stroke? You know, just all the medical things that I know about. But then I had to get on an airplane. I had already missed a friend's wedding at this point. I'd already missed multiple important events, but being a graduate student, sometimes you have to travel for research or for collaborations. And my PhD advisor said we were invited to do a collaboration with electron microscopy, which I was super stoked about, but the collaboration was located in Japan. And so I would need to get on an airplane, fly across the Pacific by myself to another country. And my gut reaction said, no, I can't do that. And sometimes when you have OCD, you cannot trust your gut reaction because it's usually an intrusive thought that's not correct. So I had to spend a good week or two with myself debating, you know, should I actually go to Japan? And the answer was, of course. It was an amazing research opportunity. I was, you know, there was funding available. I got to do cool science and, you know, learn a new culture. So spoiler, I got on the airplane. It was the longest flight of my life. It was 11 hours. The lady next to me was also very anxious, so that was fun. But, you know, it was a Japanese airline, so they served really good food on the flight, so that was also good. And I paid for the $30 Wi-Fi, so I could, you know, let my family know I was alive the entire time. But besides that, I made it, I landed, you know, we did our cool research project, and there was a moment where I had, you know, some vacation time by myself for a day. And I went up to this lake near Mount Fuji, and I went on this boat tour, and because I wanted to explore. And I just started crying when I was on this boat tour, not because I was anxious, but because I was finally, you know, relaxed, and I could finally enjoy and think, oh, this is nice. It's nice to be on a boat in a foreign country, you know, and enjoy the mountains and not be so scared all the time. And I called my parents at that point, you know, let them know how I was feeling, and, you know, my mom was very proud of me, and my dad said, you know, that you're not the same daughter I had 2 years ago, like you're an entirely new person. And he was right. And at that point, you know, I had graduated from my therapy sessions. I was told, you know, I was subclinical at this point, so I was good. And I was able to go back home, wrap up my PhD work. I actually interviewed for a job at the Allen Institute, got offered the job, accepted it, you know, finished my PhD, drove across the country to Washington. You know, everything ended up great. And if you go back and if you, in my PhD acknowledgements, you know, not only do I have my mentors and faculty and family and friends who I have written in there, I also have my OCD therapists, Chris and Hannah, written in there because none of this would have been possible without them. Thank you.
Keep it going
Thank
for
you,
Rachel,
Rachel.
everybody!
Wow.
Wow. Who else needs a break after that? That was a bit of a roller coaster. We have 2 more amazing stories for you, but let's just take a really brief intermission. Get up, stretch your legs, take a bio break. I think there's some soft drinks out in the lobby, maybe. And come back here in about 5 minutes for our second half.
And then after that, we're going to have a reception out in the atrium.
At the end of the show, we'll have a reception out in the atrium that will include alcoholic beverages. So remember, if you learned anything during this time, we'll take care of you then.
So enjoy. We'll see you in a few.
Is everybody refreshed? Yes. Oh, some people are very refreshed. That's good. That's good. Welcome back, everybody.
2 more tellers. So we get to actually say the word penultimate, and I never get to say that.
I was just saying I say it way too often. I really like that word.
$1 for everyone who says penultimate at some point tomorrow.
So licking sea anemones, saying penultimate, those
Yeah.
are the dollar activities for tomorrow. Be careful with those sea anemones. So as you're all getting settled, we just want to tell you a couple of ways that you can find more stories in your life. If you love, enjoy, are curious about storytelling, one of those ways is that the Story Collider has a podcast. It comes out every Friday. That means new stories come out tomorrow. I produced one of them.
And I produced one of them.
Did you?
Yeah.
Ah! Yes,
didn't
please
know that.
clap us for that. That's exciting. We didn't plan that. So that's a great way. It's free. That's right. $0.99 to you. Wherever you get your podcasts. You can also go to storycollider.org to find the latest episodes. They're 10-minute stories just like the ones you're hearing tonight, and just as good. So we highly recommend that. Also,
We're having a Story Collider show here in Seattle on November 7th at the Rendezvous. And it looks like maybe 1 or 2 tellers from the Allen Institute that you haven't seen tonight might be in that. So we would love for you to join us.
yes, nice.
And you can find tickets for those, and we only seat 50 for the night. You can get tickets for those at our website, storycollider.org, shows.
And you get to see our very own Kent Whipple again. You don't get to see me unless you come to New York, because that's where my home stage is. But I'm frequently on the podcast, so that's good. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Are you ready for your penultimate story?
Yes.
Our next storyteller is a scientist in the data and technology team. He tells me that he investigated how loud noise causes damage in the inner ear at one point in his career, and then promptly ignored all of that by going to as many loud concerts as possible. Please welcome to the stage, Ashwin Bhandi.
It's 2013, and I'm a grad student here at the University of Washington in Seattle. It's been 2.5 years since I packed all my stuff into a car and moved all the way across the country to be 3 hours away, 3 time zones away from my parents, from my family, to pursue my dream of studying the beautiful brain of a singing fish. And honestly, life's going great. I have a wonderful work life. I have great friends. All of my bad decisions haven't led to bad consequences yet. And lately, I've been interested in the concept of the Umwelt. For those of you non-German speakers, this is a philosophical construct about how our experiences, the things that we assign meaning to, the things we pay attention to, how all of these come together to form our idea of the world. I'll later learn that the word Umwelt directly translates to the self-centered world, which is a great way to describe my mid-20s. But I'm interested in this partially because I'm noticing my own world is changing. In the 3 years that I've been in Seattle, I'm different. I'm a West Coast guy now. I'm more chill than I used to be. I genuinely enjoy the rain and the spider seasons. I have a favorite pho place that I won't tell anyone about. And it gets me thinking, if I can change so quickly, I wonder how an animal's world changes and how that leads to adaptation and the evolution of a species. Now, with a lot of generosity, a little luck, and a little networking, I get a chance to study this question in the three-spined stickleback fish. So if those of you who have never seen a three-spined stickleback, I want you to just close your eyes for a moment and imagine a small fish. You got it. it's a little more angular and spiky than what you're thinking. And the males have this beautiful red mouth and a red belly that makes it look like they just went to town on a cherry popsicle. But what's wonderful about sticklebacks is not what they look like, it's what they are, which is highly adaptable. And I'm interested in particular in stickleback that live in this one little lake in Canada. Now, this lake is the stickleback's whole world. But what's happened is one has split to two. There are two sticklebacks in this lake. And they live in different places, they look different, they behave differently, they eat different things. And what I want to know is, even though they share the same world, do they live in different worlds? I get a chance to work on this. I pitched this to my advisor and my postdoc friend Matt, who studies sticklebacks, and they say, great, what do you need? Well, it turns out what I need are permits. So because they only live in this one little lake, they're considered an endangered species, so they're heavily restricted. Fortunately, Matt knows the professor who has access to these fish. So it's up to me to convince this professor that I should work on this. I practice my pitch in front of the mirror for what feels like 100 times. And on a cold spring morning, we drive all the way up to Vancouver and meet this professor at his neighborhood coffee shop. And over a double latte, I really let him have it. I'm giving the hard sell. I'm really interested in this. I want to test the limits of their visual system. I'm not going to hurt them. And I'm going to build this amazing rotating aquarium to test this. And I'm going through this pitch. I'm done. Ta-da! And I look over at this guy. And he's got this face like, that's it? I could have been doing my taxes. Instead, I'm here with you. So I thank him, and I'm beating myself up over it, a lot. Like, what could I have done better? How could I have done this? When Matt calls, and he goes, dude, that's how Matt talks, dude, Dolph loved your idea. He's totally on board. And I go, really? Are we living in the same world? Because I totally bombed that. And he goes, no, it's fine. It's great. Now, there is a problem. He can't give you any fish. So you'll have to go to the lake and do your experiments there. So whatever you're going to build, make it portable. I say, okay. Over the next few months, I work incredibly hard to build this rotating aquarium that I've promised. And when I'm done, it's a work of art. It's beautiful, it's portable, and it works 80% of the time. So basically perfect. And so we pack this apparatus, some fishing gear, some coolers, and we drive 9 hours north with 3 ferries to this little tiny island off the coast of British Columbia. When we get to this lake that I've read about, I've dreamed about, I've heard about, we get there, and it kind of sucks. I imagined snow-capped mountains in the background, maybe a bald eagle flying overhead. And it's a glorified pond next to a road. But I don't care, right? I'm here, I'm going to test out this idea that has been burning a hole in me. I start setting up my equipment, and immediately it turns out that we can't do these experiments here. See, it's partially cloudy, which means that the sun keeps going in and out of the clouds, and so the light levels are all over the place. We can't do this. What are we going to do? So the 4 of us put our heads together, and we decide, well, we need a place that has constant light that's coming from straight down from up top. And the only place we can think of that has light like this is the bathroom in our motel room. So we pack everything up, the apparatus, coolers, everything, and we head back to the motel. Now this motel is one of those long single-story motels that I'm sure you've all driven by. Long carpeted hallway where the carpet looks like it was put in back when doctors used to smoke in the hospital. And we get into the bathroom, I set everything up. I have to set this rotating aquarium on the closed lid of the toilet, but that's right under this dome light So I feel very happy, very proud. We get everything set up, but it's a little cramped. To get in and out of even the room, you can only open the door just a touch. You have to really squeeze by. But things are set up. And over the next 3 or 4 days, our schedule looks a little like this. In the morning, we go out to the lake, we catch as many fish as we can, put them in coolers, haul them back, test them all day in the bathroom and in the aquarium, and then put them back in the cooler, and then head back, put them back in the lake. And by the time we're done, I'm feeling really proud of myself. I'm not proud that I blocked the bathroom for all the people that came with me, but I'm really proud of the work that I've done. I had an idea. I talked to enough people to convince them. I really went through with it. And so on the last night, we decided to celebrate. We go to the motel bar that's attached to the motel. Same interior designer as the carpet person. It is not going to be on Architectural Digest anytime soon. But wood paneling, wood floors, wood everywhere. And we're having a couple of Molsons, and some local Canadian guys come by, and they want to talk to us. And they go, "Hey, are you native?" This is a bad accent. "Hey, are you native?" And I go, "No, I'm Indian." And they've never met an Indian guy before. And so I go, "Well, you're welcome." And it turns out that they're interested in us not because of me, but because of all four of us. See, from their perspective, here's what they've seen. 4 out-of-towners who are holed up in their motel room all day. When they come in and out of the room, the door opens only a crack so you can't see it. They've got some weird contraption. They meant to say apparatus. They've got this weird contraption, and the only thing that comes in and out are these coolers. Oh my God, they think we're drug manufacturers. So we convinced them that we're not. We're fish scientists. It's very easy to convince. And we're met with this mix of relief and disappointment. They wanted to hang out with outlaws, and we are definitely not. We're in-laws, if anything. And it's not until the ferry ride the next day, when we're coming back to Seattle, that I realize what has just happened in this past week. See, when I was doing science, those 2 Canadians, they too were doing science. They had all these little pieces of evidence, and they put it together in their worldview and came up with drug manufacturers. And that hits me like a bolt of lightning, right? Science is not just a bunch of data and facts. It's how you put it together that makes a difference. And so even today, in 2024, when I think of these 2 Canadian guys that I don't remember their names, I'm filled with gratitude. Gratitude for not calling the police initially, but also gratitude for making me a better scientist, for really making me understand really what science is, which is this quest, this process that's never ending, because we'll never really know the truth, but we can do our best and try to get close. And I also want to thank them for making me a more empathetic person. I knew, at some level that other people had thoughts and other people had their own worlds. But now I really know because of this close call. So wherever you are, rural Canadians, thank you for everything you've done, and thanks to all of you for listening.
Keep it going for Ashwin!
Marvelous.
If you are a fish biologist, some other kind of scientist, not a scientist at all, but you've had some science occur to you in your life at any point, you too can pitch your story to the Story Collider. The easiest way to do that is to talk to Kent after the show. Come rushing over, tell him you have a story. Maybe you'll be able to be featured in one of our shows. Or
Coming up on November 7th.
coming up on November 7th. Get your tickets now. But also, if you want to sit on it a little bit and you're not quite sure, like me, the first time I was invited to tell a story by a colleague, I said yes and then very quickly said no. So if you feel that way, that's also normal. But you can email us at stories@storycollider.org. You can go to our website and click on the tab that says submissions. And you can tell us about your story idea at any time, now or in 10 years. Hopefully we'll still be going by then. So yeah, you also can. And a lot of our pitches come from people who have been in an audience, just like you.
Yep. And even on the pitch page, it has some pointers on how to provide a really lovely pitch. So we can kind of help you with that. Also, keep your eyes out for 2025 because the Allen Institute has a lot of wonderful programming coming up. They're working on it right now. So keep your eye out on the website on the calendar at the Allen Institute.
Yes. And with that,
We
Are
come
you
to
ready?
our final teller of the night.
our ultimate
The ultimate.
story.
Han Arbok is our next teller. And Han is part of the Frontier Group, which helps provide the funding for other companies doing research. Han also loves their 2 dogs and gardening, which they're not really good at. And their friends, the crows. Please put your hands together for Han.
I was typing away at my laptop, trying to squeeze out a few more sentences on polymer chemistry to meet the minimum page requirement, when I saw the flash and heard the ding of an email notification. The subject line was, "Congratulations, you've been nominated." And I thought, for what? What could I have possibly done to be nominated for anything? So I open the email and it says, "You've been nominated for the NCAA Woman of the Year Award." My heart sank into my stomach. I felt like I stepped on a slug with my bare foot. It was gross. So, ever the logical person, I went through how I might have gotten here. First, I acknowledged I did attend a historically women's college. Yes, I was a student. I was on a collegiate athletic team. Yes, I was an athlete. But really, they couldn't find someone who was more of a woman than me? I felt like I was taking up someone else's space. So I dubiously submitted my resume and other materials and waited. I was reading a structural biology paper for a discussion session and saw the flash and heard the ding of another email. Whew, my throat was dry. And I opened it and it said, "Thank you for trying, but you're not a finalist." I felt a wave of relief. I wouldn't be taking up space from someone else. I wouldn't have to tell them that I didn't feel like enough of a woman for this. I could take a deep breath. My heart rate calmed down. My secret was still safe. Onward to focusing completely on becoming a scientist. Every day during grad school, I walked down a hall, and on the wall were the portraits of all the previous department chairs. They were eerily similar. The same graying or balding white man. Just a little variation each time. Once with a vest, once with a blue jacket instead of gray, once with glasses. All of these men had a look of power on their face, the kind where a single affirming nod could make or break the career of someone like me. Walking past these men and in their halls, I felt a fire light inside of me, and not the kind that's really quick with some lighter fluid, but that's low and white hot, that if you don't fully douse it, the next morning when you get up, it'll still be hot. But despite this, I wanted to be a portrait on the wall, right? I wanted to be the person that when you looked at that portrait, you should be a scientist. You could be a scientist, but the white hot determination couldn't quench the other thoughts rattling around in my head. Until one day I had an epiphany in the bathroom while I was washing my hands. The water in the sink was always
way too hot, but you couldn't adjust the temperature. So I was trying not to scald my hands when I heard the squeak of a door open that needed some WD-40. And this door always squeaked, but I jump easily, so I turned and looked. And it was a senior faculty member. Her long hair was down as usual, her uniform knee-length skirt. And we made eye contact, and then she backtracks with the door open to check the sign on the bathroom door to make sure she hadn't entered the wrong bathroom. My immediate thought was rage. I felt rage. I wanted to yell, "Don't judge me. I'm just trying to use the bathroom and wash my hands. Why do you care what I look like?" But I had that deep sinking feeling in my stomach of a thought I hadn't acknowledged. This space wasn't for me. Not because I wasn't enough of a woman, but because I just wasn't a woman. I wasn't a man either. Could I be neither? Could I just be me? Was there space for me? The notion that had been passed around through childhood with varying levels of sincerity each time, just be yourself. Was that possible? Perhaps it was. I felt comfort in occupying that gray area, but with that comfort came the terror. Coming out as a lesbian was hard enough, and now this. I had decided for my postdoc and faculty positions, I would only consider jobs on the Blue Coast or in a major city, but this, should I even tell anyone at all? I needed data. So I talked to a mentor, and she was openly a member of the LGBTQ+ community. She had a presence in a room like she always belonged there. She was warm and inviting and had this laugh that was comforting and authentic. I was sweaty and nervous, and I went to her office, and finally I blurted out at about twice the speed, "If I come out as non-binary, will I completely tank my scientific career?" And she looked into my terrified eyes and she said, "Han, if you feel you have to hide such a big part of yourself somewhere or with someone, you will not be a successful scientist." And that was it. I needed to seek out those spaces where I could be open and empowered. This was the pep talk I needed, right? The warm blanket of support. But sitting there within that warm blanket was fear. Fear of imminent change, fear of the unknown, the fear you feel the night before school, the first day when you're picking out your outfit. You want to make that good first impression to belong. The fear right before you tell someone you love them for the first time. What if they don't feel the same way? What if I get hurt? I came out to my colleagues and friends as non-binary, and they loved and supported me. The first conference I went to after I came out, there were only gendered bathrooms, and I never went to the bathroom alone. Not like my colleagues were Secret Service agents protecting me, but they were there making sure I wasn't being harassed. This was the acknowledgement I needed, the support I needed, the community, the ability to be open. Now I could just focus on the science. And I did that. I finished my PhD. I got a great postdoc. I was on track to get a faculty position. Everything was fine, right? Wasn't it? I spent hours at the microscope. My eyes were straining from the dim light of the monitors. Was my image in focus? Were there tears fogging up the eyepieces? I constantly felt like I was being pulled down a drain. I wanted to become a liquid and just ride wherever the flow took me. I was spinning. What brought me joy was going to other scientific seminars, was reading every piece of scientific literature that came across my desk. Spore formation, genome editing, placental biology. What was absolutely miserable was sitting at my own bench, doing my own research for my own project. I was sitting in my advisor's office one day, and she asked, "Do you want to do this? Are you happy?" I cried. I hate crying, but I cried and finally got out, "No." And in that one syllable, I questioned if I was even cut out to be a scientist. Once again, I was taking up a space that I didn't fit the description for. Being a scientist was generating data, doing experiments, running a lab. If I couldn't do that, if I couldn't be that piece of my core identity, then what was I? I was spinning. Once again, I was falling apart. But this time, there was no gray area like with my gender identity. There was a stark dichotomy, a black and white. I could be a scientist or not. I told you I hate crying. I told this to my fiance on our first date. I don't cry. I don't need to. It doesn't do anything for me. It just gives me a headache. Yet here I was, sobbing into her shoulder. I didn't get a headache. But she comfortingly and soothingly told me, everything's going to be all right. You are smart. You are capable. You deserve to be happy. She wrapped me in a blanket, put a dog on my lap, and then another dog right beside me. And slowly her words became mine. Everything will be all right. I logged into LinkedIn for the first time since I made my account in undergrad. I tried to not let that blue banner feel like a flag of defeat on my path to becoming a not scientist. And I started scrolling and scrolling and scrolling past how to crush your interview. What could there be out there for someone who had vast experience in frog pedicures and dabbled in herpes and pox virus research? Scrolling and scrolling, and then I saw it, the job post. If I could distill it down into a newspaper clipping, it would be something like this. Wanted, scientist who wants to explore the frontiers of bioscience. Inquire at the Allen Institute. My heart stopped, or maybe went double time, maybe both if that's possible. I don't know, I'm not that kind of doctor. I didn't know a job like this even existed. Yet here it was, nestled right in between a R&D role at a pharmaceutical company and a clinical trial coordinator. What do I want? What makes me happy? I had to answer these questions, the kind that your therapist asks you and leave you the long, most empty pause, because only you can fill that. Leaving behind the notion of what you thought something was and completely changing it is scary. But if you want to be a good scientist, you have to be open. You have to find the spaces to be bold and feel empowered. It was my first day at the Allen Institute. I went to orientation. I changed my password. I toured the building. I marveled at the copious amounts of free coffee now available to me. And then I finally sat down at my desk and I opened up my computer to check my email and saw the flash and heard the ding of an email notification. And then about 50 more. Okay, here we go. I checked my calendar expecting it to be completely blank, but I have a meeting in 30 minutes. At this point, I was thinking, I made a good choice on my first day outfit by picking something with layers because I am sweating so much and it would be embarrassing. So I walked down to with my new team to meet the external visitors that were coming for this meeting. And we're all going around the room introducing ourselves, and part of that is talking about how long we've been in philanthropy and grant making, and 3 years and 15 years and 8 years. And I'm still sweating a lot and I'm nervous, but it's my turn. I'm Han, I use they, them pronouns, and I have been here for 3.5 hours. I don't do experiments. I don't run a lab. I don't spend 14-hour days at a microscope. But here at the Frontiers Group, I explore the possibilities of bioscience. I look for what's next. I belong in this space exactly as I am. I am a scientist.
Keep it going for Han, everybody!
Yay! Oh my goodness.
Wow, what a show. Stick with us for a moment. We have a few thank yous, as you can imagine. We want to thank Stephen and Jerry for making us sound great.
We want to thank Christina, who's just set up all the events.
We want to thank Claire and the whole education and engagement team for hosting us, for making all of this happen.
We want to thank Amy and Amy.
Our ASL Amy's. Eric, our photographer.
And Gabe, who created this beautiful art that you see behind us. We want to thank our 5 amazing tellers.
Woo! Thank you so much for coming. We've had an amazing time. Stick around for the reception afterwards. And if you have a moment, please fill out our survey and let us know if you had a good time, if you didn't, if you want to make any changes. We don't really mind. We just love feedback because we need data. So,
And I want to thank Paula.
And I want to thank Kent.
Thank you very much. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
everybody.
night. We'll see you out in the atrium.